A chance to get kind of filing in here. And for those of you guys who are already logging in, welcome to today's class. We're just going to take a second before we get going. And let me slip something in the chat room real quick for you guys. All right, well, I'm sure more and more people will be following. It's a little bit hard to tell who's in here already. So let me first welcome everyone in and introduce myself. My name is Craig Grant. I'm the CEO of the Real Estate Technology Institute. I'm your instructor or speaker for this session. And before I get going, let me first introduce Tammy Ordway, who's with Falk Kaysen. She's going to be our sponsor for today's event. So everyone, welcome Tammy.
All right. Well, thank you, Craig. And I would just like to take an opportunity to introduce Falk Kaysen. I'm Tammy Ordway. I'm Director of Entrepreneurial Services at Falk Kaysen. And I've just celebrated my 31st tax season. So I'm very passionate about everything that has to do with tax and small business, especially in and around Kent County. Now, Falk Kaysen is a regional firm, and we do have an office in Dover, Delaware, Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, and Ocean City, Maryland. So we can help you with any of those accounting or tax needs in and around, our area. In Falk Kaysen, though, we have developed a realtor and broker niche. We do understand that it can be very challenging for realtors with record organization. So we've come up with a tool to help you with that organization. And then also for brokers, we're asked a lot of questions of, should I remain a partnership? Should I convert to a subchapter S corporation? So we provide those strategies for you too, especially in the area of capturing deductions. What are you entitled to deduct? And a lot of realtors are confused in the area of meeting expense versus meals, travel, auto, office in the home, technology expenses, and all of these things have kind of changed and evolved over the last couple of years. And we've stayed on top of that for you, and we've given you the tools to organize. Also, too, we're following legislation very carefully. Congress has already unveiled some potential tax increases. This is especially hitting married filing joint couples making over $400,000, and also estate limits. So if you know anyone that is a high income earner, there's some things you can possibly do for the rest of the year to help prepare you for what might be coming, our way next year. So again, have fun during your session, and Craig, I'll turn it right back over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, and appreciate you for sponsoring the topic as well. All right. So as I mentioned before, my name is Craig Grant, and the session we're going to do today is called How to Work with Today's Connected Consumers. And by the way, if you have not been to any of my sessions before, it's my first one at today's event, but I have spoken at the Delaware Association Realtors Convention a couple times in the past and done other events for the state and throughout the state. But if you haven't been to my class before, just to kind of give you a quick kind of idea of what you're going to get into. I always tell all my students, because I teach just about any technology or marketing or cybersecurity topic, if there's a geeky topic, I cover it because I'm definitely a geek and a proud geek, but I try to make anything I teach as non-geeky as possible. That way it's as easy as possible for you guys to understand. So feel free to ask me questions in the chat or the Q&A. I'm going to try to monitor those as much as I can as I go. And also, I already put this into the chat room for you, but one thing that I do as a bonus for any of my classes or sessions is I do share my entire slide decks with my students. So I already put this link into the chat. It's also on the slide you can see on your screen. But if you go to reti.us/CEG event, you'll see it's a very basic sign-in form. Just your name and email address is all you have to input. And then once you hit submit, you can either click on the link on the confirmation page, or you also get an email. You could always go back and click on the same link in the email that's sent to you. And you can download this entire session. In fact, it's a lot more than what we're going to cover today in the next 55 minutes. So that being said, let's kind of get rolling on talking about today's consumer. And there's no doubt technology has changed today's customer in every way possible. We're really going to dig into how and why tech has changed the customer so much, what kind of changes it's really created in them, and then also as a realtor, what can you do differently to work with them better, service them better, communicate with them better, and so on. But there's no doubt technology in every way has had a major, major change, whether it's the explosion of the internet, mobile devices, social media, everything about technology has changed consumer behavior in every way possible. But if you were to ask, what is the one major thing that has changed the consumer more than anything, even more than the internet, even more than social media, it's actually mobile. Mobile devices have changed every aspect of consumers' lives in every way. And I always kind of dig in. We're going to kind of go over this the next few minutes. How much mobile devices really have changed everything in our lifetimes in such a short period of time. Because we've only had smartphones in our lives since 2008. So we're talking in a 13-year period, it's had a major, major impact on when we do things. And if you don't know the current statistics, 58% of all internet traffic now comes from a mobile device, a phone or a tablet, meaning only 42% of internet traffic is coming from a computer, a desktop or laptop computer. So what I always say is when it comes to your internet activity, everything you do for fun on the internet, shopping, dating, research, social media, looking at properties, anything, is really happening on a mobile device. Anything you do kind of businessy is really now happening on your computers. So your computers are back to being your workstations. And everything you do for fun, including real estate, is now happening through mobile devices. But in the real estate world, it's not only more than half of the internet traffic, it's the way better half of that internet traffic. And what I mean by that is Google and NAR did a big joint study together back in 2019 called the Zero Moment of Truth, or ZMOT. And it was all about how consumers are really doing real estate. So of course, that study is going to pop up a few times in this session. It was what kind of devices they're using. When they look at a property, they care more about the photos of the kitchen versus the bathroom, what kind of videos they're watching, and so on. But to me, the biggest finding in the study that I personally pulled out of it, and I think it's the biggest thing by a large margin, is this right here. Whatever size of a device a consumer is using gives you, the realtor, a very strong hint how far along they are and how serious they really are. In other words, a lead you just got off the internet. Is it probably a quality lead, should follow up on quickly as possible, or it might even be a waste of your time? The size of the device the consumer is using usually tells you that. So, for example, when somebody's using a computer, they tend to be very early in the process of doing real estate, and they're still months away from doing a buying or selling decision. So it's that early kicking tires, thinking about doing real estate, but not serious yet when they're on a computer device. Once they switch over to their mobile, and their mobile ends up becoming their primary tool they start using on more of a daily basis. Now they tend to be much later in the phase of doing real estate, and they're very close doing a buying or selling decision. So the best customers, the best leads you get off the internet by a huge margin are the mobile users, not the computer users. And it might seem weird to you. You think that somebody would probably rather look at properties on a big screen monitor and look at those photos and videos on big screens. No, the smaller device they're using, the more serious they really are. And by the way, this isn't even factoring in that back in 2015, Google made the biggest change they've ever made to their search engine, where they basically said from this day forward, if your website cannot pass what's called the mobile friendly test, which is that link right there, which by the way will be on the next 3 slides also, but if you can't pass this test, your website has no chance to show up high on Google ever again. It's now the number one factor. So all you got to do is go to this link, google.com/webmasters/tools/mobile-friendly, type a website address into the search bar and click analyze. And a few seconds later, you know if that website passes and is mobile friendly or not. If it passes, they'll tell you right away, awesome, your site's mobile friendly, it's easy to use on a phone. But if it fails, then not only tell your site failed, but tell the exact reasons why it just failed. It's all about the little phone screen. On a little phone, your text is way too small for somebody to read. Your links, your buttons in your menu or navigation are way too small and too close together to use on a little phone screen. And your mobile viewport is not set, which means you're not even trying to detect to see what kind of device someone's on. Do you know if they're on a phone versus a desktop? You don't even know because you don't have one little line of code in your website that would have told you that, which is easy to put on a website and publicly available. So mobile is primary in every aspect of consumers. Everything you do in your business, in your marketing, everything has to be mobile first. And by the way, the mobile device has not only changed the devices your customers are using to do real estate, it's also changing the times and places they're doing real estate as well. And what I mean by this is, back in the old days, before we all had a phone in our pocket or pocketbook, it used to be that the consumer would schedule some time, block off some time on their calendar, and sit there and scroll through properties, let's say for half an hour. And a few days later, they would repeat the process again. Let's schedule some time, sit in front of the computer, and scroll through more properties again. And the bottom line is the phone has changed that completely. To me, the top right one in this graph is the craziest one by far. 28% of your customers are looking at properties while they're waiting in a line. So in other words, they're at the supermarket. There's two people have them in the line and they're kind of bored. They're no longer reaching over and grabbing the Inquirer and flipping through that. Now instead, their phone's coming out of their pocket. They're playing around on Zillow or Realtor.com. And that's what they're doing when they're just bored or it pops in their head. They're doing it at work. They're doing it in restaurants. They're doing it at other people's houses. And the first one's also extremely important. 77% are looking at properties on their mobile devices in their own homes. And what that means is if they do have a laptop or a desktop computer, could they go to it and get on a big screen monitor and look at those things better? Sure, they could. Are they typically doing that now? No, they're still typically on their couch, on their phone or tablet anyway. And you got to realize a lot of the stuff we're about to get into of how the modern customer has zero patience and wants everything right away is heavily driven by the mobile device. It's a huge, huge game changer. Also, in the past, customers typically kept with every minute of their lives, kind of their daily home base was their email inbox, but they would check their email on big screen devices. And in the old days, consumers would have taken the time to go cover to cover and really consume a lot of information, whether it be a magazine, a newspaper, a newsletter, whatever. They took time to consume information in the old days. And they would have even taken the time to read the descriptions of the properties in the single page ad. They did that kind of stuff in the past. But today's customer doesn't do any of that anymore. First of all, if they are checking their email, all studies show that the majority of email now is checked on mobile devices. Okay. And most people read their email in vertical orientation, up and down. And you may not realize this, but the subject line of the email in their inbox on a phone maxes out at 25 characters. That's how much opportunity you have to get someone's attention these days in their inbox. What their new home base is, where they spend way more time and make more decisions, is in their social media feeds. That's where they're making hiring decisions. That's when they're deciding how to get help and all that is out on social media, not their email inbox. And the bottom line is today's consumer doesn't take the time to read or consume anything. They're all in a rush. In fact, one stat that I always give out, which is crazy, is the human adult now has a 7-second attention span. That's what you're marketing to, and that's what you're trying to communicate with, is somebody who's definitely not reading in 7 seconds. They're watching and sometimes listening. Okay, so you got to adjust some of these things based on how consumers are changing so much. So that's kind of our little intro. What we're now going to start digging into is we're going to go through 4 major trends, 4 things that are very, very different about today's consumer than the customer of the past. And usually if we were in more of a classroom settings, I'd say, hey, let's share some war stories, because every realtor that I know thinks they ran into the one crazy customer and they're the only ones that have ever worked with a customer like this. But a lot of times when I have a lot of realtors in the room in a classroom setting and I have them share all the stories, they're like, oh yeah, I've had so many customers like that that are texting me at 11 o'clock at night and blowing me up all the time, asking me questions and everything we're about to get into. Okay, so again, you're not alone. These are the same kind of things that just about every realtor deals with a lot of customers. It's very, very common these days. So our first major trend that's very different about today's customer than the customer of the past is today's customer has access to everything they want. They can research anything they want on the internet, not just the available properties in your market, but they can research the schools, the crime rates. They can look into demographics, and anything else they want is available to them online. So the typical customer now is much more educated and prepared than the customer of the past. I'm sure all of you have had customers coming to you with a list of properties that they've already researched themselves online, right? And they just need your help to get them in those doors, but they come much, much more prepared. Or like, for example, some of the common stories that are usually shared when I have the classroom for this topic is how many of you guys have ever had a customer who not only researched the property's history, but the property owners, right? They're a buyer. They want to put in a very low ball offer. They want to put it in, let's say the property's on the market for 500. They want you to put in a bid of 350. And you're like, the seller's never going to go for that. Well, they just bought the house in 2020 for 280. They've only had the house for less than a year. I mean, the husband's a doctor, the wife's a lawyer. They can take a little shave off of this, right? But they can research anything they want. And lastly here for this trend, your typical customer is a little bit more skilled at using technology than they were in the past. And I'm not saying that all of a sudden every single one of your customers is relocating from Silicon Valley. Not saying that in any way. What I'm really saying with that last bullet is there's so many more tools available to consumers that weren't available to them a couple of years ago. Even though sites like Zillow might have some issues we'll talk about, okay, there's still a lot of great data and tools for the customer to use on there. And there's tools online for customers to do their own net sheets, figure out their own financing options and everything else. So the typical customer is a little bit more skilled because the tools are easier to get to now. So if you're wondering, is this a demographic thing? Is it because of their age, income, education level? If I was teaching this topic 15 years ago, we easily could have made big assumptions based on demographics. The reason why we can't anymore is the phone. Every one of your customers has a smartphone, and that really levels the playing field. Everyone has access to the internet these days and apps. So you don't want to make any assumptions based on their age, income, education, or anything like that. But if you do dig into the demographics, something very important does jump out. And what it basically is your demographic age groups have grown up and changed your customer base. So for example, as you can see here, in the first column is the name of the generation. In the second column in green are the ages they are between now. And this is based on 2020 NAR data. And then the third column is what percent of real estate transactions they were part of in 2020. So as you can see, your silent generation is between 76 and 99 years old now, and they're now down to 5% of transactions. They're still very traditional in their marketing communication styles, very low tech usage in this generation, but they're kind of aging out of the real estate world because they're between 76 and 99 years old. You get into your boomers who are much more digital than the silent generation is because the internet happened early in their lives, still while they were majorly in the workforce. And they make up 33% of your transactions. But here's the real key that I always point out. If you were to take a line and draw it right at the boomer generation, what you're really seeing is silent and boomer generation only equals 38% of your transactions. And what that really means is 62% of your transactions are now Gen X, Millennials, which also go by Gen Y, and Gen Zs. That's now almost 2/3 of all real estate transactions of those three generations. And these three generations have grown up with the internet. They use it every day in their lives and in their business and everything they do. And now they have become your primary customers. And the other big thing to catch on to here is millennials are now the number one customer in the real estate world by a large margin at 43% of transactions. And the reason I say that is they're not kids. They don't live in their parents' basement like a lot of realtors treat them. Millennials are now the number one customer. So you got to understand that. And you need to possibly adjust your strategies to make sure you are working better with millennials. Again, 43% of transactions. And by the way, on the seller side, the numbers aren't that much different. Obviously, there's a little bit lower millennial selling than there is buying because it might be into their first property, not second and third. Okay. But again, still a good amount of your business is coming from Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z. And to quickly take on millennials, because again, they're typically a very underserved or sometimes even ignored generation in the real estate world. And a lot of times when I work with realtors and try to train them how to work with them better, a lot of realtors think that millennials are hard to work with. They're too detail oriented or too much kind of stuff. And I just tell them, no, that's not true. You just understand how they operate. Okay? You got to understand millennials a bit better to work with them better. So the reason why millennials sometimes come off as being hard to work with is first of all, it's how they've been raised in a few different ways. And what I mean by that is, first of all, the way they've been raised in school, the way they've been educated is different than all other previous generations. Any millennial, when they went through a school, let's kind of say before millennials, boomers, Gen X's, we all had a traditional classroom setting where the instructor giving a lecture, you taking notes as quickly as you could, then going back and also reading the book, cramming your notes, cramming the book, and trying to pass a test. What millennials, now Gen Zs, are now happening to them in school is what's called the flipped classroom, which is basically an instructor, a teacher saying, here's the topic we're going to learn today, generational marketing. Now, everyone go to the internet, go to Google, go to YouTube, go to Wikipedia, go to all these different places, do your own online research, and then either do a solo or a group project to prove you've learned about generational marketing. So they've been raised from day one on doing online research. So they're very, very skilled at doing it. Okay. Number two is how millennials tend to make their real estate decisions. And what I mean by this is if you go through real estate school, they typically train you to promote and sell a property. You got to sell the value, the features of the property, stuff like that. And those typically are things that are not that important to millennials. When you do research and and talk to millennials about how they make the real estate decisions, it's based on one thing: lifestyle choices, such as school zones, short commutes if you're in a big area, public transportation, gated communities. They care more about a lifestyle than they do about features and square footage. Okay. And the third way millennials tend to operate a little bit differently in the real estate world is how they make financial decisions. And what I mean by this is, and again, it's another way that a lot of real estate schools are misleading new realtors, is again, they're training you how to price out the property, a $500,000 property, and so on. But if you kind of work with a millennial in that way, they're going to be like, I don't get 500,000. I don't have that much in my account. I just know what I can afford on a monthly budget. What can I afford for $3,500 a month, including the mortgage, including the insurance, including all the utilities? What can I afford? Okay. So again, you just might have to learn about this and adjust the way you are operating if you are trying to target or work with millennials. This study here from NAR shows you age does not matter at all. 97% of your customers are using the internet. 97%. That's crazy. Okay. And you can see it's not just the internet. It's mobile apps is the third most common tool they're using. Video sites is number 5. Okay. So they're using different pieces or parts of the internet all throughout the process. So just understand this. And again, if you're not doing a lot of online marketing or have a strong online presence, it might be time to step up your game there, because this is where your customers are. And then lastly here for this topic, for difference number 1, is this just shows you not only is the customer using the internet in crazy numbers, they're getting better and better at it every single year. And what I mean by this is last year, 51% of all properties purchased, the buyer found it themselves online, not the realtor. The realtor only helped them find that property they purchased 28% of the time. And every year NA updates this stat, those two numbers typically go in opposite directions. The customer keeps finding it even more and more. The realtor keeps finding it for them less and less, which leads us to big trend number 2. Not only is the typical customer today getting more tech savvy and more prepared and educated in everything we just covered, but sometimes they're over prepared, right? Sometimes they're even so prepared they're empowered to the point of being cocky. And what I mean by this is I can guarantee you every single person in this session at some point has had a customer who has challenged you for your lack of information. What do you mean you don't know about this property? I found it on Zillow. Well, it's not even on the market yet. It shouldn't be up there, but they still challenge you. What do you mean my house is only worth $350? The estimate online said it should be worth $580. I want that, right? But they're constantly challenging because of the amount of information on the internet. So a big thing that you've got to understand is I always say our customers these days have been a little bit brainwashed or misled by Zillow and HGTV, right? They really believe everything on sites like Zillow, and that's what the price should be because it's the number 1 site and it is a great site. But they really believe everything they see on there. And then also they watch HGTV and they think you're going to find them the perfect house within 3 showings and that they can rehab that kitchen for $5,000, right? None of that's going to happen. So a big piece of this we're going to talk about is you got to make a lot of effort into re-educating new customers because they are a lot of times misled. Okay, so just a reality, but you also got to work on how do I wean them off of a site like Zillow, get them into the tools I want to offer them. In fact, one tool that I highly recommend, now this isn't a guarantee, not every MLS is partnered with them, most have, but if your market has HomeSnap, that is a tool I typically recommend as a great option to get a customer out of Zillow. Because the best way I describe HomeSnap is it's Zillow without being Zillow, meaning it has a very similar, amazing customer experience, a lot of great content and tools and stuff they can do on there. And the big deal is you're not worried about sending your client to, let's say, Zillow and losing the customer to another realtor who bought the premier agent in the zip code. You can invite your customers into HomeSnap and work with you in there in a non-branded, non-upsell environment. And again, it's a very similar, if not even better experience than Zillow has, which is key to get them out of a site like that. So bottom line though, today's customer a lot of times is cocky. So you have to sometimes re-educate them or kind of reposition it so that they understand the real world of real estate. And by the way, just kind of a little bit more on the cocky customer, okay? NAR and a lot of the other entities in the industry have done several focus groups with consumers, and they'll ask consumers, tell me what you really thought about your realtor. And the thing is, some of the major kind of trends that kept coming out of these focus groups were things like, I really liked my realtor. They were a very, very nice person. We got along great. But the overall gist was, I kind of felt like I was doing their job for them and that they weren't working very hard for me. I know it's because they had too many other listings. They didn't have time for me. Maybe they had a second job. I don't know. But I kind of felt like I was doing their job for them. I'm, of course, going to teach you how to overcome this big objection. But that is the mindset of today's customer. They're doing the work and you're not. Okay. But just the reality. All right. Trend number 3 is today's customer has zero patience and they want instant gratification for everything. In the old days, you used to be able to get away with calling the person back the next day, even calling them back at the end of the day. With today's customer, if you take too long, pretty much guaranteed they've already moved on. Or if you're already working with them, they're going to be frustrated if you take too long to get back to them. To kind of give you a couple of stats to back this up. One is a study that the California Association of Realtors did, where they asked consumers, when you contact a realtor during normal business hours, how fast do you expect a response? And the options the consumer can choose were either immediate, half an hour, 1 hour, 4 hours, 12 hours, or 24. The immediate answer that consumers gave was 50%. Half of them expect immediacy when they contact you during normal hours. And by the time you added up the 1 hour option, in other words, immediate, half an hour, or 1 hour, it was all the way up to 97%. So only 3% said it was okay to contact me after an hour. But I'm going to show you in the next study, it has literally become minutes, not hours with today's customer. And what I mean by that, MIT did a great study. Now, this was not specific to real estate. This covered many different industries. But what they did was they analyzed a business's response time to a lead or a communication and how much that impacted the lead conversion rate for that business. And what they found was minutes mattered big time. So you would think getting back to a customer in 30 minutes is doing a solid job on customer service, right? Not anymore with today's consumer. If a business responded within 5 minutes, leads converted over 100% better than a 30-minute response. And if a business responded immediately, leads converted over 400% better than a 30-minute response. And we're just talking a couple minutes here. Okay, again, 30 minutes is not saying you're a horrible person. But with today's customer, they aren't waiting around. If you take too long, the odds are they've already called someone else until somebody picked up that phone. And then trend number 4 is the one that kind of stinks to talk about the most, but it's absolutely a reality, is today's customer really has very low loyalty in almost every part of their lives. This is not just for real estate. The analogy that I always use, if today's customer can save $1 on Amazon versus buying it locally, they do it every time. Or if it doesn't even save them $1, but saves them the hassle of having to drive to a store and deal with a person, they do it every time. Even before the pandemic, there's a reason why Amazon was killing almost every retail and service sector, because today's consumer is more about kind of convenience and cost savings and not about brand loyalty anymore. It just stings more in the real estate world because this is a loyalty-based business, okay? And to kind of give you a couple of stats or studies to back up how little loyalty is kind of still here in the real estate industry. So the first one is from Inman News. And this was a pretty hard study not to pay attention to. What they did was they polled 1,000 buyers of a property and asked them the most basic question of all time. Do you remember a realtor's name? Yes or no? Not that the realtor's name was Wesley Stefanik. Just do you remember his name? Yes or no? And the crazy fact is 70% within a year said, nope, I don't remember his name. How could I hire you again or refer friends and family if I don't remember what your name was a year after the transaction? That's crazy. And if you don't really trust Inman studies and you'd rather go to NAR data, let's give you a few of those. So the first one is what percent of real estate consumers only interviewed one realtor before they hired one. Okay. The crazy fact is it's now 73. Oops, sorry, click twice there. 73%. Okay. They're no longer lining up 8 interviews. Really, the first one that picks up the phone first and at least doesn't kind of screw it up typically gets that transaction or that deal. So one interview, 73%. Another way to look at this, now this one's positive. What percent of buyers either said they would definitely or probably recommend the realtor to somebody else? Again, this one's very positive, 91%. Okay. The problem is, though, only 66% ended up doing it. So you just lost 25% who said they would, didn't deliver that referral. And when you look at the breakdown, you're only getting maybe 1 or 2 referrals out of a customer, even if you did an amazing job. Okay. So the typical consumer, the customer, isn't give you as many referrals as they used to be. Okay. Now we're going to talk about how do you improve this. And by the way, on the seller side, the numbers are almost identical. Again, 91% on the seller side, 67% ended up doing it. And again, pretty low percentage getting more than one. Okay. So again, the loyalty is just not there like it used to be. And to me, the true sign of loyalty isn't did you refer someone else to me, is did you hire me a second time? I helped you, let's say, buy that property. You're going to hire me a second time when it's time to either sell that property or maybe do a second investment property, right? Rehiring is the best sign of loyalty. Well, the crazy fact is the industry is down to a 13% rehire rate. That's it. Now, by the way, I'm not trying to make this all doom and gloom and make it sound like just give up on trying to build relationships with your customers. I'm actually saying the exact opposite. You've got to double down on relationships. They're more important than ever, because if not, the typical customer now doesn't care. They don't care who they work with or who gets paid. To most customers now, again, it's about convenience and cost. And by the way, real quickly, just to address this, if you don't know about iBuying, which is becoming a major thing in the industry, it has the chance to eat away at loyalty more than any of us ever come before it. Because the entire pitch of iBuying is I'll buy your house for cash right now and never list with the realtor. Don't even put it on the market. Don't deal with showings. Don't deal with anything else. So if you don't know a lot about iBuying, you might want to research a little bit and learn more about it. If I had more time this session, I would go into it deeper. Okay. But again, you need to understand it. That way you can sell against it. Or if your company offers it, understand what it really means. But the bottom line is the whole idea is cut the realtor out, sell it for cash right now. All right, so those are our 4 major trends. At the same time, all this is going on, today's consumer does expect more of the realtor than ever before. It's a much more complex business than it used to be, and they expect you to know everything. And the customer does typically expect their realtor to be at least a little bit skilled at using tech. Now, if you're not tech savvy, I'm not saying you're doomed to fail, get out of the business right now. I'm going to teach you how to fake until you make it, how to make yourself look more tech savvy than you might be. But no customer wants to feel like they're working with a dinosaur and having to teach you everything as they go, right? Just a reality. All right, so what can we do to address this? Up until now, it's been all about the customer. Now we're going to spin it back to you, the realtor, and we're going to say, all right, what can you maybe start doing differently to work with this new customer who's over-prepared and cocky and has no patience and loyalty? So the first thing is to really solve the big problem. You need to know what the biggest problems are. The top 2 complaints consumers have about realtors in 2020 were the exact top 2 from 2010, 2003, 1981. Every year, the same 2 complaints are communication and follow-through. And follow-through can mean a lot of things. It can mean you didn't follow through on a promise you made to them. It could be that you're not communicating with them enough, and now they feel like they're in the dark and you're not doing your job. Follow-through can kind of cover a lot of things. So what I'm going to give you is when you start working with a brand new client, I'm going to give you a series of questions to work into the discussion to make sure you're addressing these 2 big complaints they have and also set yourself up for success working with them. And by the way, if you're working with more than one person in the transaction, say it's a husband and a wife, separate them for all 4 questions. You might get totally different answers to each of the questions. But the first question you always should ask a brand new customer is, what is your personal preferred method of communication? Are you a phone call person? Are you an emailer, a texter? Do I have to handwrite letters and deliver them with pigeons? How should I be communicating with you during the entire time we're working together? Get this out of them. It's their number one complaint. And whatever tool they tell you is their favorite communication tool might give you a little bit of a hint how needy they're going to be for communication and updates. And what I mean by that is if they say they're a phone call person and they leave you a voicemail, they're expecting a response within 4 hours. Okay. If they say they're an emailer and they leave you an email, it's actually shorter. They actually expect a response within 90 minutes. But if they are saying I'm primarily a texter, a expected response time for a text message is only 90 seconds. Okay. And the reason I'm pointing this out, if you in any way don't like the text and refuse to text with your clients, my advice would be to get over it, because texting is now seen as not only the most preferred, but the most polite way of communicating across all generations, because it's an uninterrupted conversation. I could just ask you a couple questions, you can answer them and continue doing what you're doing, and I'm not trapping you on a phone call. Plus, to some customers, it's a documented form of communication. They have you in writing saying things. So if you would all think it's rude to text or not a good way to communicate, my advice would be to get over that. Okay. You have to adapt your customers' needs, or they will find someone who will. And the other thing very quickly is I always say, take advantage of the all-in-one communication tools like Google Duo, Skype, WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, FaceTime. You can do texting, phone calls, video calls. You can give them a walking tour of a property if they're not with you. These tools are great to communicate with customers, especially if they're international or out of market. All right, question number 2. What is your expectation of frequency of communication? Because this is the follow-through complaint. You don't tell me what's going on, and now I feel like you're not working and doing your job. Are you looking for daily updates, weekly updates? Just let you know when something really important is happening. Don't bug you all the time. Get this out of them because of the follow-through complaint. And just so you know, the first meeting is your one and only chance for you to lay down your own personal communication boundaries. You have a tool to write to tell a brand new client, typically after evening hours, after dinner time, I'm not checking my phone all night long. That's my me or family time. I really don't check it till the morning. So unless something's really, really important, probably don't try to get a hold of me late at night. You have a right to tell a brand new client that. And majority of them, if you tell them at the beginning, will respect your boundaries. Might have the occasional jerk client still texting at 11, but most will respect it. But you can't do it later because they're going to be like, oh, fine, I'll find someone who doesn't mind texting 11 o'clock at night. But here's my one little weird question. Let's say you tell a brand new client, I don't typically answer the phone all night long, but then a lead comes in and you're just so happily awake and not in the middle of something and available to pick up that call for that lead. How many think it might make sense to do it differently for leads versus customers? And my answer is, if you want any chance to generate business with today's consumer, you're willing to take leads off the clock, because after business hours are by far the highest percent of internet traffic. That's when people have the most time to play around on the internet, when they get home after work, after the kids are in bed, and so on. And the other thing I always kind of point out, 10:30 at night in Delaware is not 10:30 at night everywhere. If they're on the West Coast, it could be 7:30 at night. If they're in another country, it could be middle of the day. And trust me, somebody in Europe or Asia is not clicking on a time conversion tool before they click to call the realtor. They just click and call, okay? And the other thing that I always kind of throw out is, I'm sure some of you in this class have actually picked up that phone at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night for a lead. And typically the response you get is almost word for word this: oh my God, I didn't think you were going to pick up at this time of night. I just thought I was going to leave a message. The consumer is blown away you're working at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, because the previous two people they tried to call didn't. So leads also convert the best outside of normal business hours because the customer's not expecting it and it impresses them. So again, you might want to tell new customers, I don't take leads at night, but be willing to pick up the phone for a lead. Question number 3. And it's not really a question. You can come right across the bow and ask a brand new client, how are you with technology? They might either lie to you or they might feel embarrassed if they're not tech savvy. So this is a little bit of a feeling out process, but it's very easy to figure out. What I always recommend is that you can create, I call it your tech toolbox worksheet. It's a little one-sheet piece of paper you can type up in Word in 20 seconds. But that little sheet of paper might have a handful of websites and apps that the customer might want to use if they want to be more involved. And you could always come up with one sheet for buyers, another one for sellers. I already gave you something like HomeSnap. You can put your local property appraiser's website on there, whatever you want to put on here. But give them a handful of tools that they might want to use And then you ask them one very basic question. As you hand them this sheet of paper, you say, hey, are you okay figuring out these few websites and apps on your own? Or do you want me to give you a quick little lesson how to use each one of these? Any tech savvy customer is going to laugh about being offered a lesson. They'd be like, I can figure out this app on my own. But a non-tech savvy customer, I'd be like, actually, yeah, that'd be great. Could you give me a lesson? Because it kind of looks kind of confusing to me. You'll know right away that customer is not tech savvy. You're going to have to hold their hand a whole lot more than that tech savvy customer, probably set up their search profiles for them, do a little bit more research for them, stuff like that. And by the way, even if they don't take you up on the offer for the lesson, you look like a tech savvy realtor out of the box right away by giving them the sheet and offering the lesson. Okay. Now, if somebody says, yes, please give me a lesson, you got to be prepared to give it to them. But again, if you learn how to use 4 websites and apps and offer the lesson and teach them, again, you look even more tech savvy if you actually give them the lesson, right? And all you're really doing is learning how to use 4 apps. So give them a little sheet of paper with some tools and ask them if they want to have a lesson. It really helps figure out their skill level. And then question number 4, and again, this one's not really a question, is I always say you want to go a little bit beyond and educate them about a couple of very specific things other than how you're going to work with them and maybe market their property, whatever. But you want to throw in some other things into the discussion, okay? So the first one is you want to educate them about the real world of real estate and how real estate really works. And the reason is, we talked about this earlier, you kind of need to kind of like uneducate them about the world of Zillow and the world of HGTV. They need to understand the Zestimate doesn't matter. If it doesn't appraise, it won't hold water, right? They need to understand the real world, how things work. I know they can't rehab that kitchen for $5,000, and they're not going to find the perfect house within the first 3 showings and everything else. You got to make sure they understand the real world of real estate, how it really works. And what I always say is that can kick you into number 2, what I like to call the sites like Zillow discussion. And what I mean by that is one of the other first questions you should ask a brand new customer is, which tools are you currently using? Because I guarantee you, especially on the buyer side, before they've ever contacted you, they've already been on Zillow. They've already been on Realtor.com and a few other sites. So you want to ask them, hey, what tools are you currently using? That way you kind of know what they're working with. And then you can have what I call the sites like Zillow discussion. And what I mean by that is you can tell them, okay, yeah, that's cool. You're using Zillow and Realtor.com. By all means, keep doing so. But just so you know, here's what you might end up running into. You might find listings that are off the market, that aren't even available. You might find some price valuations that aren't very realistic. You might find some for sale by owner listings and pre-foreclosures, and just kind of tell them all the warts of sites like Zillow. Okay, have a little discussion with them, and that ties into how the real world real estate works, the appraisal versus this estimate and everything else. And by the way, to take that a step further, I always tell you, like, part of that sites like Zillow discussion is you can say, okay, if you keep on using that, by all means, keep doing it, but then turn me into a personal gopher. In other words, anytime you find a listing you're interested on, Zillow or Realtor.com, whatever tool you're using, shoot me a quick text, shoot me a quick email, the listing information you're interested in. I'll then go into our MLS. I'll look it up and get you the current accurate information. But the only way to get the accurate information is coming through me and our MLS. Again, it all ties into this whole sites like Zillow discussion. But you want to educate them about these things, and then you can also try to eventually wean them off and get them into a tool like HomeSnap. Okay. Number 3 that you want to work into the initial discussion is you want to educate them specifically about wire transfer fraud. And if we had more time in this session, I would kind of teach you a little bit more about wire transfer fraud, because it is the most dangerous, most harmful thing happening to real estate industry right now. And the truth is, you need to make sure a customer understands that on day 1, teach them what wire transfer is and how they can get an email, the link in it to kind of execute their transaction, and in one click destroy their life, right? They can wire the money into a fraudulent account and lose their entire life savings. So they need to understand that on day 1, and you might even want to have them sign most states have a wire transfer disclosure agreement, a little contract saying you've explained it to them. But all that should be discussed with them in the first initial meeting when you start working with a brand new client. And then the 4th thing you want to do with a brand new customer to add into this conversation is, I mentioned a few times throughout the session how today's customer really feels like they're doing your job for you and that you're not really working that hard, right? It's just a crazy reality. Today's customer doesn't think you're working hard, even though we know the facts. You're grinding 24/7 trying to help them buy or sell a property, right? So the fourth thing you want to work into this initial discussion is you got to build in the value of a realtor and what you're bringing to the table for them. They need to know how you are grinding nonstop. And what this is that I just kind of threw onto the slide, if you're not aware of this, and I'm going to put this link into the chat room for you. But back in 2006, the president of NAR at that time had to testify in front of Congress because the government was trying to challenge, like they've done a couple of times, why is Realtor get to make 6% of a transaction to help someone buy or sell? Let me make sure I type this right. All right. Why do you get to make 6% of a transaction to someone buy or sell a property? So first, she had to educate them. We don't get to make 6%. It's a negotiable commission that's split amongst two parties, right? And out of your commission split, your marketing costs are coming out of that, your MLS dues, your brokerage fees. You have all these costs coming out of your split. You're definitely not walking away with anything near 3% of each transaction. But first, she educated them about that. Then she rattled off 184 things a realtor does to earn a commission. All the behind the scene things that a typical customer has no idea you're doing on a daily basis in your job, of arranging photo shoots, and whether it's you doing it or a photographer, getting all those photos uploaded into the MLS, and then getting it syndicated out to the portals, and making sure all the marketing is arranged, and showings, and everything else. She rattled off 184 things. So what I did was I took her list of 184 things. I then turned it into a brochure, and not only did I turn it into a brochure, I turned it into a template in Canva. So if you guys aren't familiar with Canva, it's a very easy to use graphic design program. And one of the cool things about Canva is you can make a template and share it with other people. So if you click on that link I just put into the chat room, you'll see you can go to it in Canva and then just make it your own. Meaning you can just put your picture in the bottom left corner in that little circle, type your name and your phone number in, add your company logo to the bottom right corner. And now that brochure is going to be completely branded to you, and you can download it and print it out, whatever you want to do with it. Okay. So that's my little kind of gift to you, is you can just click on this link and make this brochure yours. And that kind of helps you kick in the discussion of, hey, here's just a small list of everything I do for my customers. I'm working 24/7 for you. By the way, I also do a ton on social media. I do virtual open houses. You can add to the list because, again, this was back in 2006. But again, it helps you kind of kick in that discussion of, I really am working hard for you, and I'm bringing a lot more to the table than just sitting back waiting for the phone to ring like they might be thinking. Okay. So again, these four things you really want to work into the initial discussion. Oh, sorry, I got to click over here. All right. At the same time, all this is going on, you also need to adjust your marketing to today's consumer. And the reason I say this is we just talked about how different the customer is. And one of the major things I talked about is they have no patience, right? They're not reading, they're watching, and sometimes listening. So you might need to adjust your marketing to address this. So first of all your marketing has got much more visual, okay? Not much less words, much more visual marketing. And one of the keys to internet marketing is the fact that it is really, really easy to do personalized marketing and targeted marketing. If you just do what's called mass marketing, where you're sending out the same message out to huge groups of people, it does not work at all anymore. The more personal and targeted it is, the better it is. So you might want to adjust your marketing accordingly. Also, social media should become a big part of your marketing plan if it's not currently, because this is where your customers spend their most time and make a lot of their life and business decisions, is in social media. You also should be incorporating a whole lot more video into your business, because video is by far the most dominant way of communicating and marketing these days. Okay, so again, adjust your marketing to today's consumer. And here's a biggie that I teach a lot in my marketing classes, much more relationship based. As we covered in this session, that whole loyalty part is going away a lot, right? So you need to spend more, I won't say spend, invest more energy than ever into building and maintaining friendships with your customers and working your kind of contact database in your CRM to stay in front of them and getting together with them throughout the year and keeping that friendship going. Otherwise, to most customers, it's become a pure transaction. Okay. Relationship should be a huge part of this business. And if you're not investing in that now, you should adjust your marketing to make sure it is. And then the other big thing we also want to address is on your end as a realtor, you have to have the right tools in place so that way you can be a modern realtor and work best with your customers. And what I mean by that is you have to, at this point, be 100% mobile. The days of having to run back to your office or run back to your house to get to a computer to do things are over because of today's customer. They're not waiting around. They want instant answers and instant gratification at all times. So it's about having the right hardware, the right smartphones. Tablets are small, light computers that you can carry around very easily. Having the right software and apps in place and really leveraging the cloud, because the cloud is the key to being mobile, where you don't have to worry about, well, I worked on something on a computer. Did I remember to transfer it over to my phone? If it's a cloud-based program, it updates and syncs across devices very, very easily. So you've got to update your tools as well. And I teach in a lot of my tech classes how to do this kind of stuff. But again, today's customer doesn't wait around. They're not loyal. They're impatient, everything we've covered. So if you're not really modern in how you do your business, it might be a good time to assess that and try to improve where you're not modern. Okay? Because again, the customer is different. Therefore, you have to match them and meet them where they are in the tech skill. All right, so hopefully you guys learned a lot in this session. I try to cram in as much as I could into this hour about who today's customer is, how they are so different, and what you can do differently to work with them better, communicate with them better, service them better, and everything else. Because like we talked about, today's customer is very different in many different ways. So that being said, I'm going to open it up in 2 seconds for Q&A. But before I do so, I'm going to put this back into the chat room for you, how you can download the entire class. Let me just move this real quick. We don't have to say welcome anymore like I did at the beginning. All right. So just like you see up on the slide, I just put into this chat room. You can go to rati.us/CG event, fill in your name and email address and hit submit. And on the confirmation screen, it'll say, click here to go download any of Craig's classes. It also sends you an email with a link in it. So if you don't have your device with you that you want to download this on, you can always check your email and click on the link in the email and go to the same download page anytime you want. And you'll see if you download this class, it's way more than we covered today because this class is built out for much longer than an hour. I really tried to just trim it down and cover the essentials. All right, so that being said, let's open it up to you guys and see if you guys have any questions. I'll check both the chat and the Q&A to see if there's any questions you guys have about anything we did or maybe did not cover. So any questions, guys? Right, everyone just so good. I didn't have to, no questions going on here. Yeah, I'm assuming either you guys totally got it or what? Because I'm not seeing any questions either in the chat or the Q&A. But again, I'm happy to answer anything. Oops. All right, well, I'm not seeing any questions flowing in, guys, so I don't know really what that means. But again, I'm going to stick around. We still have, I think, 4 minutes left in the session. I try to leave that much time for Q&A. But if there aren't any new questions, I want to thank you guys for coming. I hope you guys enjoyed the session and got a lot out of it. And again, you can download all these slides and get even more than we covered today. All right, any questions, anything, guys? All right, like I said, I'm going to stick around until the time's up. But if anyone has any questions, I will be sticking around here. You're welcome, Claudia. Not a problem at all. You're welcome, Sandra. And I'm just glad my internet held up. I'm in the middle of Montana, and this hotel stinks. Okay, guys. Well, again, I'm watching the Q&A, watching the chat. If there's any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm sure there's other sessions you guys can hop into or whatever the case. But again, download the class, go to the Canva template. You can always click on that link also I put in the chat to get that. And hope you guys really enjoyed the session. I don't think I've ever had where nobody had questions. Crazy. Widest Q&A ever. All right, guys, I haven't seen a question come through, so I'm assuming everyone's good. So I'm going to go ahead and shut it down in just a few seconds. But again, if you have any last second questions, sneak them in. It's your last chance. Yeah, we'll just ride out the minute and see what happens. That 1 minute wasn't real. Let's see what happens in 24 seconds. Bye, everyone. one.